Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Well, I would like first to thank to the NDP program and to the TCD program for giving me the opportunity to have this space and to talk about this study. So today I will present the results of a study that aims to explore some environmental concerns related with infrastructure and logistics services, mainly focused on agricultural and mining chains. And this study aims to improve the environmental management in within Latin America and Caribbean. So this study has been elaborated for the Economic Commission of Latin America and Caribbean in 2017, and it has been done within the framework of the project Logistics Integration for a More Sustainable Exploitation of Natural Resources in Latin America and Caribbean. This study has been held, this project has been held by the Infrastructure Services Unit at ICLAC, and it also complements other studies that are part of this project, but these other studies help to have a better understanding of the economic, the social, and the institutional perspectives of a similar topic. So all of them together seek to strengthen the government capabilities in the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the initiatives of physical integration, design and implementation of logistic strategies and public policies. So most of us are familiar with the importance of natural resources in the region. I think that's one of the main reasons why all of us are here today in this place. And I would like just to give some statistics. The region hosts the greatest diversity in the world. 8 of the 17 mega-diverse countries at a global level are in the region. These countries include Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Bolivia, Mexico, and Venezuela. The region also has a large degree of endemic species. The region has 1/5 of the native forests, 12% of the arable soils, and 1/3 of freshwater reserves. In terms of minerals, the region is also very important. 95% of the reserves of niobium can be found in Brazil. In Argentina and Chile, there are 65% of the reserves of lithium. Peru, Chile, Mexico, and Bolivia have 45% of the economically recoverable silver deposits. And Peru, Chile, and Mexico have 44% of the reserves of copper. So the main markets of these products are the US, the European Union, China, and Asia, and also other emerging countries. So this richness, both in natural resources in general, also reflects the importance of the agricultural and mining activities for the economy and the society in the region. In 2016, for instance, in terms of the added value of the GDP at current prices, 5.8% corresponded to agriculture, whereas 3.4% corresponded to mining. There are important differences between the countries as well. In Paraguay, for instance, also in relation to the GDP at current prices, the added value, the percentages were 20% for agriculture and 0.2% for mining, whereas in Trinidad and Tobago, it was 0.5% for agriculture and 19.7% for mining. In terms of social aspects, millions of people depend on agriculture and mining for their income and their subsistence. In 2014, 18.5% of the occupied population dedicated to agriculture and 0.7% to the mining sector. Similarly, as I mentioned before, there are differences between the countries. So in Peru, for instance, agriculture corresponded to 26% and mining to 1.2%. whereas in Costa Rica, agriculture corresponded to 10.4% and mining to 0.5%. So until now, we have been able to see the richness that we have in the region, the importance of the mining activities in the agricultural sector. So around all of these, there have been many production chains that have been confirmed. This begins with the initial provision of inputs over here that are needed for production until the final consumption, which we can see over there, and also related with national and international markets. Some aspects that are important to consider is that each of these chains have different levels of sophistication and added value. All of these operate within a determined social, economic, and environmental context. And they are affected by the regulatory frameworks. They receive support from logistics and infrastructure services, as we can see over here. And these services also facilitate the production, local and international transportation, and in the end, the exchange of goods. These are at the same time determined by the knowledge transference that can come from universities, research centers, and extension services. These value chains are also influenced by the financial services that are available and can provide them with capital to operate. And each of these also have different levels of access to technology. They can be supported by the local, national, regional government. So we are able to see that there are different actors that are that are part of these chains, and the integration of them allows them to generate coordination mechanisms that facilitate the information flows. Also, another aspect is the collaboration, which is based basically on the development of trust and willingness and commitment between the communities and public and private sector. This promotes both horizontal and vertical relationships between them. So when I am talking about horizontal relationships, I'm basically talking about the relationships that between the people who are making a similar activity. And when we talk about the horizontal relationships, talking about the relationship between different groups of people that are doing different activities. So finally, both the integration and the collaboration between all these participants are essential for what we have in the middle, which is the innovation and sustainability, since they allow the identification, comprehension, and the use of abilities and innovations for the development of more sustainable practices that can be incorporated in each stage of the production process. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to talk more about infrastructure and logistics, and we are talking about planning of both of them. The planning of them should aim to articulate each component of the chain, where they can develop a holistic and long-term vision of the territory to be able to implement actions that enable them to attend the market, to add value and to improve the competitivity, and also to generate more equity and take precautionary measures so these actions are in tune with the environment and with society. Particularly talking about agriculture and mining activities, that these activities take place in the rural areas, and in the region there are different challenges for the rural areas. Just some additional statistics in these areas. In 2014, for example, 46% of the population were poor. 17% were, only 17% of the population older than 15 years old had between 10 to 12 years of schooling. 89% had access to electricity. In 2015, 84% had access to some source of improved water, and 64% used some improved sanitation infrastructure. can see there are different challenges, as I mentioned before. And another one is that there is a deficit in infrastructure. So in average, between 1999 and 2004, 72% of the population had access to roads in the region. If we add to these layers historical aspects, it's possible to see that the development of logistic infrastructure in the region has responded to the need to transport large amounts of goods in the least amount of time and with the least and with fewer resources. So this has difficulted the connectivity inside the territory and also the participation of new actors. So the development also forward and backward chaining has suffered from this. So this poses several challenges to the development of value chains, given the geographic conditions and the social needs and the environmental components of their competitiveness, the possibility to add value and their sustainability. So these infrastructure gaps also generate overcosts as a result of a lack of connectivity, the increase of the time of movement of these goods, and even the loss of production due to a bad quality in the roads. So just to continue and to talk more about environmental concerns, agriculture and mining can also generate environmental impacts that can impact negatively the territory, and they can also deteriorate the living conditions in rural areas, which are already, so in 2015, for instance, 17% of the extracted water was used for irrigated agriculture, and 2% to 8% of total extraction of water was used in the mining industry. So, for instance, we think about 2% and 8% when we say that it's not that much, but it is important to take into consideration that mining activities usually concentrate in some watersheds and sometimes in the heads of these watersheds, where they can reach up to 40% of the total extraction. So this generates competing issues with for water resources. Other pressures include loss, degradation and fragmentation of habitats, land use change, overexploitation of biological resources, water resource production, and introduction of invasive species. So there is a series of, so trying to address these issues, there are a series of environmental requirements that are aligned with production. So some of them also specify which kind of inputs, how residuals are going to be disposed, how to maintain the quality. They are also related with food security and with traceability. So these requirements can be can be at a local, national, regional, or even a global level. And the alignment to these frameworks in some cases may provide access to different markets. So talking about the multilateral environmental agreements, which are written treaties celebrated by states and are governed by the international public law. And this enables to establish a uniform criteria and alignment with more global issues related with environmental management. So these MIAs provide an umbrella to the countries, so they can develop their own legislation related with environment. There are 6 guiding principles for the multilateral environmental agreements. Just to mention them, these are prevention, the principle of subsidiarity, shared but differentiated responsibility, openness, polluter-based, and precautionary approach. So that's only an overview about MIAs. There are around 250 MIAs up to today So for this study, we have only focused on 9 of them. 6 of them are more related with foreign trade, and other 3, the Minamata, Ramsar, and the ballast water, are more related with other aspects, but very important, very relevant for mining and agricultural activities. Just to give you a brief overview of each of these agreements. CITES, which is the first one that appears here. So here we have all the countries, and which are the countries that are parties of each of these agreements. So in the first column, we have CITES. CITES seeks that foreign commerce of animal and plant species do not constitute a threat to their survival. Basilia, which is the second one, aims to protect human and environmental health from pernicious effects from disposal of dangerous waste. CBD is concerned with the conservation of biological diversity through its sustainable and equitable use. The next one is climate change, which aims to stabilize the greenhouse gas emissions. And the Paris Agreement that aims to implement nationally determined contributions to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. The Rotterdam Convention promotes health and environmental protection from plaguicides and other chemical components. The Stockholm Convention aims to eliminate or reduce persistent organic pollutants, which can affect public health and environment. The Minamata Convention aims to protect human health and environment from mercury emissions. The Ramsar Convention looks to give a rational use of wetlands. The Ballast Water Convention to avoid the propagation of aquatic organisms that can hamper other regional organisms. So as I mentioned before, this chart shows all the countries in Latin America and and also show that they are part of these agreements. Therefore, again, coming back to the center of our talk, the new logistic infrastructure should be designed, implemented, and managed and regulated using criteria which should be aligned to the mitigation of environmental impacts, so they can also provide support to reaching the targets that each of these agreements seek. So, it's a lot of information, but we are going to see now the agricultural chains and then the mining chains. So I will give a brief explanation of the stages, in this case for agricultural chain. So this section also tries to explore some environmental aspects as well as infrastructure services. So in Latin America and the Caribbean, as I mentioned before, it has abundant water resources. Nevertheless, their spatial distribution is heterogeneous. This gives a space for a variety of ecosystems. And for instance, we have the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is the brightest in the world. And we can go up to the Chocó in Colombia, which is one of the regions greatest, one of the most wet regions in. So water is an essential resource for agriculture. In general, irrigated areas are more productive than rain-fed ones. However, it is needed to take into consideration that sometimes the practice of irrigation can lead to salination. Therefore, it is important to continuously evaluate the quality of the soil, So in designing and implementing these type of structures, it is important to pay attention to the governance of water resources for property rights, essential to guarantee efficiency systems, as well as any kind of investment that would take place. In relation to soils, we continue with the second point. Agricultural area has increased 4% between 2004 and 2015. Soil characteristics are correlated with the biomes which they are located, and their ecosystem services are also affected by different sources of pressure. So in addition to the development of better practices, a combination of gray and green infrastructure would also support to reduce the impacts of agricultural activities. Continuing with the next point, the intensive use of fertilizers and pesticides in many countries in Latin America can also contribute to soil pollution. It has been estimated that 96.7 million liters of water per year are affected by pollution related to nitrogen, from which 46% would have resulted from agricultural production. Chemical products are able. We continue with the last one over there. It's the part of production. So chemical products are evaluated in both the Stockholm and the Rotterdam Convention, as I mentioned before. The use of pesticides has increased in the region. Important attention to lists of both conventions is needed, so we can be sure that none of these products are being used. The lack of equipment for managing solid waste that contain these liquids, these elements, can also pose a threat on human health and environment. So there is a need for a proper recollection, treatment, and elimination of these. So we have gone through production. Now we go to the post-harvest processing and transportation. So in the post-harvest stage, integrated management plans for water are essential to reduce waste and pollution. Several technologies can also be implemented at this stage. Talking about cold chain, maintaining the cold chain is essential for quality. As we can see here some statistics. So 127 million tons of food are wasted or lost every year. So the absence of cold chain not only generate an impact of energy efficiency, but also generate hidden costs, which can reduce international competition. There is a need to improve such infrastructures, particularly transport, energy, and market. The use of energy is predominantly based on fossils or fossil fuels. The access to energy sources, particularly in rural areas, is difficult because these areas are scattered. So projects based on energy microgeneration, based on the non-conventional energies, can provide some support to these areas. Finally, in this part, traceability is very important. Talking about traceability, we refer to the capability to obtain the historical information of a product based on a registered identification. So from the public perspective, it can provide some support to control risks for food safety. It can also support the collection of tax revenues, the reduction of illegal activities. It can also help to follow the flow of the products and ensure that incomes go to the desired outcome. From a private perspective, it can support planning, also to do a follow-up of production, to control the costs of production, to ensure the quality and food safety. And finally, in this area, so demand is very important, and the type of demand will establish the characteristics of the products, as well as the practices that are going to be permitted along all the process. So that's what I have for agricultural chains. Now I will move forward to mining. Now, as similarly as what I did when agriculture, we are going to explore some environmental aspects as well as some aspects related with infrastructure and logistic services. First, it is very essential to understand that mining activities can have a perpetual relevance. So in this graph, over here we can see minimum ranges and maximum ranges in the mining side. From the exploration over there in blue to the mine closing here in purple. So as we can see, the mining process can last between 30 to more than 160 years. So in each phase, it is possible to see that the exploration of minerals and their respective stages can last between 20 to 50 years. So again, that's the blue over there. You can see the 20 to 50 years. On the other hand, mine development, which is the orange, red fish, mine development takes place between 2 to 8 years. Mining operations, which is the following, all the green, can last between 10 to 100 years, and the mine closing can have perpetual relevance, as I mentioned before. In this sense, each mining cycle can last several generations. So there is a key message here that the decisions and the strategies associated with environmental, social, and economic aspects of mining need to be incorporated from the beginning operations with a very long term vision. Another aspect which is very essential and needs to be considering when talking about the mining process is the scale of the operations. So depending on these characteristics, the dimension of the potential environmental impacts, the capabilities and the availability of resources, the access to information will get better practices in the mining sector, the possibility to generate associations, the negotiation capabilities, as well as the possibilities and the strategies to attain environmental impacts that can be generated by the activity varies depending on the size of the operations. In this sense, what we can see here is the differences in the gold mining operations. So we can see some characteristics of the artisanal or small-scale gold mining, and we can now go up to a more high scale here. So you can see also some aspects over there, so you can also have an idea of the difference between them. So in this sense, one would expect that larger operations would have greater possibilities to include more sustainable practices in comparison with the small-scale operations. I think that's very much related with the amount of resources that they have available between the three. And similarly, associativity in the small-scale sector would have an important role to scaffold efforts, have access to resources. So, doing something similar to what we did with the agricultural sector, we will also follow some of the stages in the mining process. First of all, when talking about the rational acquisition of mining resources, which we can see in that part of the presentation, we refer to the way in which the permits to have access to the mining resources are given. And this can represent environmental risk. There are some cases in which permits have been given in areas aimed for biodiversity conservation, in which there can be threats to both fauna and flora. In addition, many deposits are located in areas where there is water scarcity, such as sanding zones, which are desertic, and that's a result of the latitude and the altitude. In this sense, there can be overexploited watersheds that present extremely critical conditions in availability of water resources. In addition, mining can locate in the basin headwaters and in areas of aquifer recharge. For deforestation and erosion can impact water quality and availability, the ecosystems, and the use of water in areas below. So these aspects I know I have mentioned before, but just try to keep them in mind again. Another aspect which needs to be considered is the effect of the end of the super cycle in the extractive industry and the fiscal tensions that these have caused in different countries of the region. So what happened as a result from that is that there have been some races to the bottom, where some countries have reduced the requirements related with environmental standards as a way to promote foreign investments for the development of the sector. Another aspect is that some countries also have strengthened their environmental requirements, which have led to migration of certain activities to other areas where these requirements are not as strong as in the other. Okay, some other aspects, the lack of environmental permits and the illegality of some operations that can difficult the environmental monitoring of them. And in terms of infrastructure, it's also possible to see that in some places and some mining industries build some roads or different infrastructure services. After they leave, they take this away. So the shared use of this infrastructure could also provide some support to the local and national. In relation to the operations, which is now we are over here in our graph, the quantity of water available can be affected. In the case of Chile, for example, in order to respond to the reduction of the copper law, the use of water had to increase from 77 cubic meters of water per ton of copper in 2009 to 83 cubic meters in 2015. Similarly, water quality can be affected. In the region, more than 30 million cubic meters of water with dissolved toxins are released in sweetwater ecosystems every year as a result of mining methodology. In this sense, in order to improve water resource management and to avoid the polluted water, there are also different structures of control that can help reduce the potential pollution of water that requires treatment. So following the next point, which is here, talking about energy, the energy matrix is in mining sector depends on fossil fuels. As a result of a higher energy demand, the mining sector should look ways to satisfy with the maximum efficiency possible without depending on polluting sources of energy. So the use of renewable energies in the mining sector has expanded. In Latin America, approximately 60% of the photovoltaic energy is used in mining. Among some of the environmental issues that can result from transport, production, shipment, and landing include CO2 emissions, dust, noise, and accidents that can cause leaks and contaminants. We are over here in the graph. So an example of this is that in 2007 in Colombia, the national government obliged the direct load of carbon to ships in all maritime ports in the country using conveyor belts as a result of the pollution of the sea when they were using cranes instead. So talking about the next one, tailings, which are the residuals from the mining process. These are composed by rejected material, which are transported to the tailing deposits. So failures in these deposits can generate social, economic, and environmental impacts of great magnitude. The development of strong policies and clear legislation, as well as the development of capabilities to control their construction and management, required to be very adequate. So in the region, failure in such deposits have caused pollution from arsenic. One of the worst disasters caused by the rupture of one of these tailing deposits happened in 2015 in Brazil, in Minas Gerais, where approximately 600 kilometers of waterways were polluted. It is important to develop inventories of these tailings in order to provide support to their management. But in relation to chemical inputs, we are over here. I'm thinking a bit about the graph I showed you before about gold mining. In 2010, the region was responsible for 50% of the anthropogenic emissions of mercury at a global level, where 263 tons of mercury, which is 90% of them, were emitted in South America. The main source of emissions came from artisanal and small-scale operations of gold mining, and represented 71% of total emissions of the region. Approximately 500,000 artisanal miners will be working in several countries in the region. So finally, moving to this part, mine closure and its integration with the landscape is one of the most important stages related with environmental management. That with other practices like financial guarantees to cover the costs of remediation are key for an improvement of environmental practices. Mining environmental liabilities, which I mentioned over here, are generated when mining operations have been abandoned, with or without an identifiable owner or operator, and also when after they were closed, there has been no regulation or a certified closure of the mine. This poses threats to public health as well, and also to the environment and the heritage. Some reasons for the MELs include the price fluctuations that oblige the closing of these operations, the lack of environmental regulations, and lack of inspection of the mine closing. So in this sense, it is also important to develop inventories to identify these MELs and the possible environmental risks that they can pose. So I mentioned infrastructure and logistics services along all the presentation. So now I will give a brief explanation about three modes of transportation, which I'm going to begin with the terrestrial mode. So also keeping in mind the importance of this mode and also some of the environmental considerations in their planning. So in Latin America and the Caribbean countries, the absence of inadequate connectivity generates important logistic expenditures, as I mentioned before, as a result of greater time or because less efficient vehicles are used. This is a result of the infrastructure conditions, particularly in the rural areas where in many cases roads may not exist, or if they do, they may be very vulnerable from wind and have no capacity and continuity and maintain safety. To address these issues, there are cases in the region in which the improvements of the provision of infrastructure have allowed an increase in the productive capabilities, as well as the quality of life of the population. So in the case of Peru, which I can show one of the news about what was going on in the country, since 1995, different programs have been implemented in order to provide support and accessibility to rural areas. So the population was able to have access to markets and to public services, such as schooling. Nevertheless, if we go to the other side, the development of roads in wild areas can also be an important factor in the environmental degradation because of the loss and fragmentation of habitats. For example, in Colombia, which is the image we have over here, the highway Ciénaga-Barranquilla caused the natural disconnection between the lagoon complex and the ocean. So this changed the hydrology of the wetlands and caused the death of 70% of the mangroves, as well as, and this has affected the fish population, the flow of fresh water, increased sediments, and nutrient pollution. And this has generated changes in the flow of water in lagoons and wetlands. So thinking about the importance of this mode of transportation and also the threats that it can pose, it is important to design that it is important that the design of any infrastructure includes environmental and social components since the planning stage of this infrastructure. So the hierarchy of mitigation begins with avoiding the risks, which is part of the planning stage, mitigating the environmental risks, and at the end, mitigating them. So that's the order that has been proposed here, thinking about taking care of them. So moving to the other mode of transportation. The region has a fluvial network through which large volumes of agricultural and mining loads are transported for their export. Between 2002, for example, and 2015, the Paraná-Paraguay waterway, which we can see has transported more than 2,000 million US dollars on a load of 4.7 million tons coming from Bolivia. Fluvial ways are also closely connected with different ecosystems, unique characteristics, and they have also represented some pressures on the environment. Now I'm going to talk about the different stages of the fluvial mode. So during the implementation of the waterways to improve the navigability of vessels, the activities that generate the largest impacts are dredging and the removal of rocks, and also the cleaning of the edges. So we're here, the edges, and also to provide, they take some of the, they take the soil from the water to provide space so the vessels move. During the operational stage, the aspects that pose threats or risks to the environment include the maintenance dredging, the risks of dangerous loads accidents, the water pollution by spills and discharge in terminals, as the example I gave before, but in the maritime is Colombia. Water pollution by abandoned vessels, water pollution by waste, and involuntary introduction of exotic species from ballast water. So the influence area is also affected by deficient management. So one of the aspects that was presented by ICA was the classification of navigable waterways, used as a public policy tool, which aims to determine the capacity of the actual regional network. So these are the main characteristics, the technical criteria for waterways. It also seeks the specification of parameters for the development of new waterways or the modernization of older ones. This classification could also be used to facilitate environmental management in these waterways. So to this classification, we can also add different layers of information, such as the soil's characteristics, the water resources, the ecosystems, and the biodiversity that are in those areas. Similarly, this classification can provide support to the beaconing of the waterways and also the environmental management system that could be implemented. So, going to the third mode of transportation that I wanted to talk about was the maritime mode. So the port industry and the maritime transport has been gaining more relevance in the international transport networks. More than 95% of commerce in South America is done through ports. Similarly, over the last 2 decades, the region has experimented a shift in its commercial geography, with giving more emphasis to the markets in Asia. The movement of merchandises through the ports of Latin America and Caribbean had an increase of 12.5 million of 20 fleet equivalent units, or TEUs, there in the beginning of the chart. in 1997 to 48 million in use in 2015, which is here. And this supposed an approximate increase of 285%. Among some environmental challenges, they include noise, traffic, pollution, particularly in the cities with ports. And in relation to the use of energy, most of it comes from fossil fuels. In Chile, for example, local air pollution coming from ships corresponded to 20,800 tons of NOx emissions, by 15,700 tons of oxide sulfur emissions, and 2,000 tons of particulate matter. The science, for example, it is important to introduce other sources of energy as well. Another aspect which is essential, moving over here, is climate change, and it is important to consider it in these kind of projects due to its impacts on the coastals. So changes in wave patterns and sea level rise would impact the operability of ports. Another aspect, the rebase of the dikes, and these can pose challenges in future projects, as well as the design of projects using disaster risk management and adaptation to climate change consideration. So finally, in relation to ballast water and public health, in 1991 in the coast of Peru, this is just an example, and later in other ports of Latin America, there was a cholera epidemic that took place as a result of the introduction of the bacteria Vibrio cholerae through maritime traffic, which may have resulted from ballast water. And people in those areas, after eating seafood, were affected. Well, around 1 million of people were affected, and it's also led to a large public health issue. So finally, to conclude with the presentation, we have been able to see the different components and the challenges of the production chains. Thinking about sustainability, there is a need to move towards a more sustainable path, which we would be seeing here in the sustainable trajectory #1. And to make the shift from the second to the first one, there is a need to develop and strengthen the institutions and multi-scalar governance, which are articulated among different stakeholders that allows the participation of the private sector and the civil society, and of host mechanisms and capabilities needed to reach an adequate and transparent management. Similarly, it is important to introduce the strategic environmental evaluation for the development of policies, plans, and programs, and to introduce environmental impact evaluation in the design of infrastructure projects. It is also necessary to strengthen the territory planning in a way that it enables to fill the gaps in infrastructure services, but also that include environmental, social, and economic perspective from a very early stage of the cycle. Another challenge is to strengthen the regional integration, where countries are able to address races to the bottom and the migration of activities that can pose environmental threats to other countries. And finally, the development of knowledge networks can contribute to the access to information and contribute to a continuous learning about more sustainable practices. Similarly, South-South cooperation can be an opportunity to learn and to incorporate practices that are taking place in other countries. So thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any question, I am more than